Hello, today I will be painting Groot from the board game Marvel United. Groot is part of the Guardians of the Galaxy remix box. I'll begin by painting the base coat in this Balor brown, and I'll just do it on the entire body. I used a Rigger Zero brush for quicker coverage, and the style of the Citadel Paint is layer, so I ended up applying 2 coats to the miniature. Also, I did not use a palette at all for this. I simply took the paint straight out of the pot. Next, what I did, instead of using a wash, I used panel line, and I used a black color for that to accent the recessed parts of Groot. I'm going over it pretty liberally. I plan on cleaning it up a little bit afterwards. There were several of these recessed areas, and I tried to hit them all. Now, I also used the panel line to darken the area between the rocks on the base. This will give it some shade for the end. And next, I cleaned up the black that had spilled over onto the main part. And I did this again in the Valor brown. I used a smaller brush to do this, however. It was a Rigger 3.0. And generally, I was painting with the side of the brush. And that prevents paint from going into the recessed areas. And even when I use the tip of the brush, the raised areas are pretty high, and in general, the paint did not go down into the recesses. Now, even before I started applying the paint, I had removed some of it from the brush, either by putting it on the edge of the pot or, dipping a little bit onto a paper towel. If we used a wash, we'd still have to do all of this, so it made it a little bit less of a cleanup. Alright, next I apply some highlights using Nurgling Green. This is a light mossy green color. And I'm applying a coat with a dry brush. Paint style is also Citadel's dry paint, and this makes the process a little easier. Now I'm applying the paint fairly liberally over Groot, and I'm going to be going over it again in the brown after I'm done. So if you want to skip another cleanup step or another, lessening step, you can just apply a very little amount of this green. And it gives him kind of a mossy look. He's got plant-like structures on him, so the green's pretty good. Now here I have a small brush, and I'm just adding a bit of the brown on it. I'm applying it almost like a dry brush. I haven't put all the paint through, but I'm applying very little of it and just sporadically over it, kind of mixing it in with the green that's already there. So there'll be a hint of the green in there, and still his basic brown coloring. This kind of blends the two colors together. Alright, so next is the base, and I paint everything first in uniform gray. And I try to avoid some of the black that's there. I have between the rocks for the shading, but everything else I do. After this, I give it a dry brush coat over the entire base, and I use Thunderhawk Blue with that. So here's the uniform gray on there. The next I'll have the Thunderhawk Blue on, and then so it's got the blue, and I give it a final dusting on the rocks and some of the edges of the higher parts with Chronus Blue. Both Thunderhawk Blue and Chronus Blue are dry paints from Citadel. I use a dry brush with both of them, but I could have just as easily just painted the regular blue with the Thunderhawk Blue first. Alright, for the eyes, I started with white, and then I added an eyeball in lemon yellow. So I've got white on each of them, add a little bit of lemon yellow, and then for the pupil, I add a little line or dot of black. And all three of those paint colors were by Vallejo. Alright, here's the model after he's had a protective matte finish spray. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching me paint Groot of the Marvel United board game.